State of crowdsourcing. This is by no means, it's not formal, but it's a discussion starter, and I really see this meeting sort of as our jumping off point as we get together and do more of these sort of things. Let's start off, let's make it a little more interactive here. How many people use these terms like every day? How many people use some of these interchangeably? Like crowdsourcing, contests, challenges. So a couple of papers I'm writing, like co-authors, some of them are here. We actually disagree. Like, so Lynn and Steve and I, we were chatting, like, what do we call this? Is it a crowdsourced contest? Is it crowdsourcing? So within a 15-page paper, you've got like 18 of these terms that are layered in there. And that's good for us because I think we kind of understand what it means, but I don't necessarily think that's very clear for everybody sort of outside the current bubble. And so I think there's a need for an agreement on a set of terms, right? What are some of the principles that are guiding this? That's by no way saying we should eliminate some of these, but what's the overarching thing, right? Are we just calling it crowds, or are we calling it something else? But there's a discussion that I think we want to start sparking over the next year or so around, look, can we standardize some of these things so it's less confusing? I think the natural thing to do is people go and Google and they look it up, and then there's all sorts of things that come up around crowdsourcing and open innovation, and it's not inherently clear as it is in some other industries on what those things should be. Why do we use crowds? It's to create mechanisms to find solutions, right? So we're always trying to solve problems, so that's a big thing. Build discovery paths. I think what gets lost in crowdsourcing is our ability to find new ways to do things, right? So a lot of times when I hear about highlighting successes, we don't talk about a lot of that. I mean, for us, because we're an academic lab and we partner with other academic labs, it becomes really important that the process of discovery and the documentation of the process of discovery is very important, and that's valued. But a lot of times, sometimes when you're in industry, it's sort of, well, what did I get out of it, right? How does this help us? And as we sort of discussed today, there's all these other things that are going to help us as we craft more of these roadmaps to discovery paths. And then increase search functions. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find networks and find collaborations where we're able to do this much more efficiently, much faster, and build upon the techniques that we're sort of gathering together as a community. So what is crowdsourcing? This is sort of the ecosystem as I envision it now, is that we have workers on one side and platforms on another side, and here we are kind of as practitioners trying to leverage both and trying to make progress in the way we do the aforementioned things. Right? And so, Greg talked about this briefly, but there's marketplaces which are more transactional, right? This is Amazon and the like, where you have a task and you're trying to get something done and there's an objective to it, and you're able to try to find someone who's going to be able to do this possibly at the lowest cost, or the best way to do it, or the most efficiently, or frankly just the right talent, right, to be able to do it. And there's the marketplace. And then there's communities and contests, as we outlined, and communities are a little more organic. They're norms-based governance, and they don't necessarily have to be contests. Like, we here are a community as well, and there's some things that we're crowdsourcing and doing different things and sharing of ideas, and their governance kind of changes from time to time depending on the leadership structure and depending on the needs of the community, etc. And then there's contests, which in large cases there's set objectives or defined objectives on how we are evaluating success and the outputs of it. And so contests are more derivative of sort of driving the competition to be able to get results. And the fascinating thing about all these is, again, these are intersecting. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I think a lot of the platforms here would agree that sometimes it's both, and sometimes it's a lot of it, and sometimes it's really understanding a lot of it. What we get to then is, as practitioners, is how do we leverage this ecosystem? That's a fundamental question, right? How do we really dive into working the marketplace, developing communities, organizing and designing contests and getting execution? And what we find that, look, there's a lot as you're doing these things, particularly we hear a lot from firms and organizations that are piloting, right, or experimenting or running a single contest. That seems to be the buzzy thing of late, is that, oh look, I'm running a contest. And oftentimes we'll hear, well, I ran a contest and I didn't get anything out of it, so crowdsourcing doesn't work, right? And that's a very generic statement, and we don't quite understand what that means. But there are all these things that, and not limited to, but you're collecting as this is going on. So there's knowledge sharing, there's strategy, there's adoption, there's training, there's service and execution and contracting and culture. And all these things are sort of floating around in different places, right? That we don't really have a good understanding of how this information is being collected or shared within organizations and then between organizations as well across the industry. So what we've come up with here is that there needs to be a centralized body that's collecting this information to be able to help organizations, right? So if you ran a contest and you have a list of learnings, and we can provide you of best practices and et cetera, but if you're not collecting that and then in turn disseminating that, then it's sort of the contest that you ran is not meaningful, right? One contest generally might not get you everything you need. And so what we're recommending is that as firms are scaling up, Center of Excellence, and we're sort of borrowing that from the NASA crew because they've sort of pioneered it, but whatever it is that you choose to call it, that feedback mechanism needs to go back, and these people within the centers need to be the ones to be able to pioneer adoption and be able to pioneer all these other things that are necessary, particularly around, hey, how do we get more traction around this in crowdsourcing? We're running a survey with our colleagues Frank Pilar and Kathleen Diner over at Aachen University in Germany, and these are preliminary results. They're surveying close to 225 platforms. If you are here and you are an executive and you got an email from them, do me a favor and respond and participate. It'd be great. But these are sort of preliminary findings. Again, this is still ongoing, but I thought I'd share this with you. Platforms solve problems across all industries, right? So if there isn't sort of, we only do marketing or we only do this. I think platforms are open to doing all sorts of different problem solving across all sorts of sectors. They expect that this kind of activity and service will grow within the next 5 years, right? So this is a trend that we're picking up. And then many platforms offer ideation and solution generation contests, right? And often what I say is, instead of relying on the platform to then deliver you an all-in-one solution, right, which is sometimes the case, is that, look, when you run grand challenges and the like for $1 million or $100 million or whatever it might be, you're looking for that all-in-one solution. But instead of doing that, piecemeal things, right? So ideation and solution generation contests are extremely important. And you can get very savvy with this, in that you can do some text search things, you can scout the landscape, you can get ideas, you can run initial contests, and as you're sort of generating additional contests, you can string these phased approaches together to then have moments where you just sort of test these things or stop and say, hey, look, what are we actually learning from this, and where does it go, right? So it's that agility and flexibility that it buys you, so that eventually then you can get the minimum viable product that you need. There's nothing in the quote-unquote handbook that we don't have that I'm hoping to generate, right? That says you need to run 10 contests in order to get the result that you want. There's also nothing that says, look, if you've got 1 or 2 contests that you've run, right, and the results were satisfying, that you can't bring them in-house and then develop them further, right? Either way, crowdsourcing got you the things that you needed it to do. Navigating the gig economy. I pulled some of these things, and I'm happy to share these slides. One's an HBO article, the other was a McKinsey report, but roughly 150 million workers in North America and Europe have left the confines of organizational life, right? Roughly. That's a lot. It's a lot of people that are out there, right? So if maybe you're thinking, okay, what are those millennials doing, right? They're just, some of you guys have millennials, we employ some of them, and you're just like, okay, they're doing nothing. Well, they're doing something, right? They're doing something, so how do we leverage that, right? Freelancers are driven toward knowledge-intensive industries, right? So we talked about that problem of access. Maybe this is something they want to do. Or creative occupations. Whatever they're doing is not working. We joke about this a lot, but sometimes it's like, well, all right, well, the traditional way of doing work is you sit at your desk and you work for 8 hours, and half of it you're on Facebook and half of it you're, I don't know, playing video games or I don't know what it is that people are doing these days at their station. But it's really interesting when you think about it. It's like, what else drives a worker, right? So in years past, used to be, when you worked at Google, it's like, hey, spend 15 minutes of your day thinking about something creative, right? But now, the gig economy is allowing us to be able to leverage those things, and these people, sometimes they don't want to work where they work, and they want to go do other things. 20–30% of working age in Europe, in the United States, are engaged in some form of independent work, right? So there's some causality here, and that we should continue to monitor as we do it. I highlight this because this is an important part of the community aspect of it. This guy's a member of our community. He's a member of our ecosystem. I think we forget it. Right? So W. Late is his code name. This is a top coder member. He wins a lot of our competitions. Sometimes he finishes first, sometimes he finishes fifth. But really, really interesting guy. And what he is he's a Brazilian forensics police officer, right, who joined Top Coder because he had sort of an inclination that, hey, something that I do is interesting, but there's something else that I can learn. There's something else that I can really learn, that I can leverage what's out there and the problems that are coming to me, whether it's from NASA or Harvard Precision Med problems or really interesting problems from GE. I can do this. No formal training of any sort. Right? So everything you learn, the quote here says, top coder challenges are a great way to keep my programming skills in good shape. About 3 years ago, I didn't have any machine learning knowledge. Okay? No machine learning knowledge. So instead of the traditional way of, hey, I got to go to school, I got to take this program, I got to, get up on my data science skills, he's thinking, hey, look, I've got time. This impacts my job. And further on, when they interviewed him, he kind of went on to say, this actually helps my job quite a bit. It helps me do my job because I'm skill building while learning, while being a part of a community. Right? But he's part of our ecosystem. One of the conversations that I've had with colleagues is how do we then highlight these people, right? How do we highlight members so that they can be a part of the ecosystem that will continue to develop, right? Who will join us in the workforce? Who are the contestants, right? Do you guys, those of you guys that have had winners on your competitions, do you know who they are? And some of them don't want to be exposed, and that's okay. They have the right to do that, but some of them really want to know, how can we help this, right? And platforms as well, how can they inform you? And then a good way to think about it is that platform members are the ears and the eyes on the ground. They can often signal what's happening in this space, right? So you saw that with Threadless in some organized fashion. But I think we need to get a little bit better at doing this, get savvy. What's the role of HR departments, right? So a lot of us are beating our heads and like, oh, we've got innovation departments and we do this and we run conferences, and the continual thing we keep hearing is that some of us have top-down demand, right? Do this, run a contest because your CEO wants you to do it. And then the people in the middle management are like, what, right? We don't want to do this, right? And then others have bottoms up, so you've got people who are initiating this effort and getting a lot of this stuff done, but then the top down is not there. But what's the role of sort of HR departments in navigating the gig economy, right? And then can we be more effective to outreach community members for speaking engagements and trends that we're seeing and articles and et cetera? I think a lot of times when we do these conferences, it really ends up being just the practitioner, or in a lot of cases it's just the academic, but there's a critical third piece there that we're not highlighting, and we don't really know. We don't know who some of our community members are. So what's next? What's next at LISH and across the industry? If we could, if Kareem and I in the lab could, we'd just sprinkle magic dust and make it all work, and it'd be great. But there's steps. There's steps we want to take, and so what we want to do is build skills. Right? And so I'm not talking about technical skills for platform members. I think platforms can do a lot of that. But we want to build skills in being savvy about how we share knowledge and how we do the work of crowdsourcing. How do we organize communities? How do we run contests? How do we design contests? It seems to be a big one where people are excited about running a challenge and then they say, well, I don't really understand what I'm supposed to do. Right? That's actually usually what I get. I don't know what to do. Right? Knowledge sharing, and then researching platforms further. Building skill for practitioners. How do we build in skill in designing contests and communities? How do we replicate that design so it's a lower cost to your organization, right? Platforms are very helpful in guiding us through the initial piloting stage, but after you do it a few times, you should have some strategies and design concerns, and the design concerns that you have should be addressed as you're doing this. And then more communication across the industries. How you think about a certain task is different than how others would think about it, right? What's the approach here? What's very unique about being at LISH is we spend a lot of time formulating problems, right? So we spend a lot of time. So these are discussions that we have with Renat, who's in the back over there. Renat's our senior data scientist. We have some others, and then Renat and Kareem and the team, and we just go back and forth. Is this the right question? Is this the way we want to do this? Is this the right platform? And so we've inherently developed that skill, having done it experientially. But how can we share that so that we all can get very, very adept at doing these things? So with that said, I think one practical thing we want to do is share your case. So launching on Friday, Stephen? Monday or Friday?
Yeah, Friday.
Friday. All right, we'll call it Friday. So all right. So launching on Friday is the Lit Guide, right? And what we want to do is our Innovation Science Guide .org, and this is a collection of cases, right? This is a collection of cases that we want, and they don't have to be in any sort of formatting. It's just, you know, there's some light screening to make sure that the things that you're disclosing actually happen. But what's your experiences, right? What's the contest that you ran? What are some of the things that you're seeing? What are some of the insights? And you can subscribe and you can populate, you can search. There's filtering mechanisms. We're going to grow in our taxonomy in the way we capture these things. So it's a good ground for white papers. Some of you guys have written things, and there's no place to publish it. And well, here it is. You can sort of publish it through us, and as we collect these things, we can disseminate. And I think they might then develop into other things as well. But this is a very important step in sort of our pathway forward with this. And so it looks something like this. Again, there's an abstract, there'll be a case, and this is one particular thing that we wrote a while back that I think it's time to publish. And it's our LISH case, and we did this with Topcoder and NTL for Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services to try to eliminate, or try to help CMS deal with their fraud problem, right? So there's lots of Medicaid fraud, there's lots of costs associated with it, and one of the ideas is, well, look, let's deploy with the state of Minnesota a software that is cloud-based that can do it. And these are type of things that would resonate, I think, well. The atomization of challenges, for example, how we split things into pieces so that they're not solved simultaneously, but solved in some sort of rigorous but sequential pattern, so that it's not just all one contest, but many contests strung together. And so we outlined some of that, particularly around this large-scale software project. And then cost counterfactual. So one thing we did with this was we did some research on, are there any cost savings with this, right? So in the traditional contest model, we did interviews and put together some cost metrics. And Steve, by the way, is going to share some ones that NASA's doing as a whole program. But here we saw in the cost model, on the contest model, we see about $1.5 million in cost spend. And then what you see here is that versus traditional model is about 5 times the amount of savings. But these are the types of things that I think we need to disseminate and learn and get together and use this platform, the LISH Guide platform, to be able to share ideas together. And then lastly, a couple of last things here. Crowd Academy. So what we're doing today is the framework. It's the pedagogy for something we want to do online. We've gotten lots of requests for, hey, can you do this training? There's deeper trainings we can do. There's exec ed that we have here, et cetera. But I think there's a need for some virtual-based curriculum, right? Some of the things that we discussed this morning and we'll go on to do that will go live in some fashion, whether it's through Harvard X and it's an open MOOC or if it's HBX, but we want to be able to do that, so that's the next iteration of it, so that what you're experiencing in the classroom here today is something that you'll have at your hand with your teams and organizations that you want to partner with. And then Kareem's stoked, and I always want to remind everybody that he's very stoked. Stoked about everything. But platforms are super connectors, right? That's what they are. They're super connectors. They're helping us get our work done, right? So how can we help them? How can we get this going? And it's to be able to problem solve at the end of the day. But we want to also introduce the concept of a LISH platforms meeting coming soon, TBD. We want to partner with you guys on information sharing, what you're doing for incentives, who are your members, best practices, etc. And this is sort of the wave going forward, because it's going to help us get the communication out there much faster. It's going to get us some standard practices that I think are really, really needed in this industry. And I think it's going to help those who are trying to adopt this understand this much faster. And that's kind of our goal. I'm being told I have 1 minute. All right, so thank you.